Hello, this is Alex Schwartzman, author of Explaining Cthulhu to Grandma and Other Stories, and you're listening to Cast of Wonders, an Escape Artists podcast.
This is Cast of Wonders, the young adult fiction podcast featuring stories of the fantastic. Welcome to episode 260 for August 6, 2017. We present this week Contractual Obligations by Jamie O. Mayer, a Cast of Wonders original. Jamie O. Mayer shares her Seattle home with 2 needy cats, too many fish tanks, and a patient husband. When she isn't reading or writing, she enjoys many hobbies including knitting, PC gaming, and photography. Powered by tea and buried in yarn, she blogs infrequently at jamieomayer.com, which we'll link for you in the show notes, and can be found on social media as @JamieOMayer. She has a personal essay on the representation of adoption in SFF forthcoming in the Invisible 3 anthology. Contractual Obligations is Jamie's first professional genre sale. Congratulations, Jamie. The story's narrated by our own Catherine Inskip, assistant editor of Cast of Wonders and teacher of astrophysics for a living. She spends her spare time populating the universe with words of her own. She's addicted to chocolate and Japanese logic puzzles. We'll put a link to her website and her Twitter account in the show notes. And now we've a tale to tell.
Contractual Obligations by Jamie O. Mayer. Jessie gripped the heavy skate, her eyes flicking first to the rust-spotted blade attached to the sole, then back to Emmeline, who watched her with a mischievous smile. Maybe this is a bad idea. Emmeline rolled her eyes, a chuckle escaping her lips. They sat on a lakeside bench, while dozens of Valerie city citizens enjoyed the wintry morning. Children raced each other across the frozen surface, giving a wide berth to a pair of young men working on a broken-down steam horse midway through a sleigh ride. Jessie recognised the Drayden coach by sound rather than sight. There was no mistaking the shrill nasal whine of Lady Drayden, as she barked orders at the men and criticised her daughter in the same breath. "Work faster! Alliance, stop waving your arms like a drunkard!" Allianne's response, voice light as her straw-coloured hair, was inaudible as she wobbled around in a circle, arms held out for balance. Emmeline's lips quirked up in a smile. "A dance routine on ice. It's an excellent idea." She plucked the skate from Jessie's hands. "We just shouldn't have said it where the Drayden dragon could hear." "What if I fall?" "Then you'll get up and keep going," Emmeline said, lacing the skates. She shook her head. 2 years in this kingdom and you've never been skating." Jessie clambered upright. "How do you move in these things?" Emmeline led her toward the ice with tiny steps. "You'll get used to it. Doesn't it snow in Tuncha?" "It doesn't freeze like this. You're sure it's safe?" "See all the lovely people not drowning?" How comforting, Jessie thought. "Just enjoy yourself. Promise?" "Promise. Unless I fall." "Fair enough." They trundled around the lake, and with each subsequent lap Jessie gained confidence. She even managed a quick wave at the Draydens, but feigned losing her balance to avoid stopping to chat. "Time for your moment of bravery," Emmeline said. "Leave the nest, my duckling." Jessie pecked Emmeline on her wind-pink cheek before skating away, miming flapping wings with her arms. A performance on the ice with her dramatic long sleeves. Perhaps it would be innovative enough to merit an invitation from Valerie's Royal Theatre at a mere 18 years old. Perhaps. A scream pierced the air, jerking her from the reverie and throwing Jessie off balance. Knees locking in panic, her feet slid out from underneath her. She smacked against the ice, grunting as an arc of pain shot up her backside and elbow. "Jessie!" Emmeline rushed toward her, pointing to the side. To Jessie's right, a metallic clunk and hiss of steam grew louder. The steam horse, freed of its sleigh, rumbled toward her. It lacked one front hoof, and without the aid of its ice-studded shoe, the mechanical beast careened across the lake. Jessie shoved against the ice, but her hands couldn't gain traction. She tried to regain her feet, but her inexperience with the skates, coupled with growing terror, left her floundering. She cringed, eyes frozen on the erratic hulk of metal. One moment it appeared as if the horse would strike her head, but a stride away its crippled legs skidded on the ice. The still-hooved foreleg smashed down on her right knee. She screamed, arms rising in futile defence. The steam horse collapsed on her, and her head thudded against the ground. The sharp, jarring pain from her legs being straightened roused her from unconsciousness. Emmeline's teary face hovered in view, and Jessie instinctively tried to comfort her. "Don't cry, Emmy, love." But she couldn't make a sound aside from an awful moan. Someone had placed her on a sled. It began to move, the grating motion bringing a fresh wave of pain. She didn't try to fight the buzz of unconsciousness. Through closing eyes, Jessie saw Lady Drayden standing several feet back, the only face in the crowd lacking any shock or grief. Jessie awoke in a room lit by a single turned-down lamp and filtered moonlight. Pillows cushioned her legs, and a floral-patterned quilt covered them. She recognised the hand-stitched flowers. Emmeline's bedroom in House Tembury. Reaching to remove the quilt, Jessie cried out. It felt like she was being stabbed by 100 small knives along her torso. She clutched her sides, attempting to lessen the pain, whimpering in between gasps. A loud click sounded, like a large key turning in a lock, but a glance to the bedroom door confirmed no one had entered. "Broken ribs, dearie," an unctuous male voice said. "Allow me." Jessie blinked in surprise as a child-sized man came out of the darkness. He pulled the quilt back with care, and Jessie saw a glint of metal around his neck. "Are you a contractor, yes? A little light, I think, so you can understand why I'm here." He went to the lamp and turned it up. Her growing wakefulness also heightened the bright, harsh pain throbbing in her legs. Though her mind was processing at a sluggish pace, her memory returned. The lake. The broken steam horse. The accident. "My legs," she whispered. Her legs burned not with the ache of fatigued muscles after a long routine, but with the fire of trauma, of breaking and tearing. "Hence my arrival." The contractor gave a small bow. "The advent of steam machinery has given us quite the choice in work." Jessie stared. Someone had tried to splint her bones, but noble doctors of the major houses were too costly for the likes of her. The Temburys' bearing as a minor house must have earned Jessie treatment, but she could see the harsh angles in her legs, feel how they remained wrong. Dried blood traced thick suture lines across her thighs, down both knees and along her calves. Tears welled in her eyes, and she began to sniffle, choking back sobs. "Enough of that," the contractor huffed. "If you're going to blubber, then I'll be on my way." "Silly me. I thought," he lingered on the word, "you might be interested in a contract." They locked eyes. She took in his long grey coat over pinstripe trousers. A silver-handled cane dangled from one hand, while the other fidgeted with one of the 3 dip pens hanging from a gold chain around his neck, the mark of a contractor. Jessie had heard of the strange deal-makers with their secret, magically binding contracts. In Tuncha they were called life gamblers, godlike creatures that appeared out of thin air with offers to change your life. If you were desperate. She gave her mangled legs a gentle caress with one finger, then glanced at the contractor. "You can fix them. Make me whole again." You can fix them, dearie. As for permanency, well, that depends on if you fulfil your end of the bargain. The contractor sidled up to the bed, drawing back the left front of his coat to reveal an assortment of inkwells and curled rolls of parchment sewn inside. Shall I draft us a contract? I don't have any money. We don't deal in money, dearie, he scoffed. Then what do you get? 16 lean years in rural Tunisia pierced the hope bubbling in her chest. We contractors do love a gamble. Oh, and we take whatever is at stake in the contract should you fail. A contract must have its risks. Jessie knew of only one successful contract, a kite maker from her village. His daughter had been deathly ill, and no doctor in any of the surrounding villages able to cure her. The kite maker had taken his strongest kite and flown with his daughter strapped to his back to a nearby mountain. He returned alone. Jessie had been young herself, but she remembered the serene look on the kite maker's face as he'd landed. Days later he left the village and she didn't know what became of him, but his look remained. A worthwhile contract, whatever the cost. If I do my end, I get my legs. No tricks. Sure, the contractor said as he withdrew an inkwell and a roll of parchment. Let's see, The middle pen with a gold nib began to glow. The contractor unclipped it from his neck, stubby fingers giving it a happy squeeze before he spread the parchment open across the foot of her bed. Jessie watched in fascination as the nib seemed to glide across the parchment. Though the contractor held the pen, it appeared to move of its own volition. Here we are, the contractor straightened, wiping the nib on his sleeve before returning his writing tools to their respective places. Concerning the dancer Jessie, an offer of impermanent use of repaired legs in return for 25 performances sponsored by a noble house, to be completed within 18 months. Fulfilment of the contract will result in restoration of the aforementioned legs, subject to conditions of impermanency. What does that last mean? That would be the gamble. I can't show you until the contract is sealed, but I will say that the legs have limitations. But fulfill the contract and you will have earned your perfect legs. Fail, and they'll be reclaimed. 25 dances. Sponsored by a member of the noble houses, no less. She'd started to make a name for herself before the accident. Surely she had some goodwill built. But the cost? Could she afford to lose her legs completely if she failed? Weren't damaged ones better than none at all? Sponsorship by a major noble house is worth 5 performances. The contractor gave her a wide smile, revealing pointed teeth. She looked down at the ugly, thick sutures and thought of the scars they would become, indelible reminders of what she'd have lost without even trying. She remembered the kite maker's smile. Where do I sign? If one didn't look closely, her legs appeared real. Jessie gazed down at them, fingers running along their length, feeling the smooth, unblemished skin. They were real, yet they weren't. Her legs, with gears for joints and metal-enhanced bone, felt stronger. When she danced, she felt powerful but controlled in a way her previous form never had. She couldn't lose them. It feels wrong not to care for them, Jessie remarked as she unwrapped her dance slipper's ribbon binding. So you keep saying, Emmeline said. She sat at the small writing desk in their shared room at the local inn, the book of Jessie's commitments open in front of her. Should get used to it, Jessie whispered. Emmeline heard. You will not. She snapped the book shut and went to sit next to Jessie on the floor. We're so close, Gia. 5 more. In a week. Jessie threw the shoe across the room. We're out of sponsors. There are plenty of nobles left in Valerie. Emmeline frowned. People love you and they love parties. The people may love my dancing, but the nobles don't like sponsoring a ghost. A numbing sensation in her legs ended Jessie's tirade. It's time. Emmeline helped her up onto their narrow bed. She retrieved a tiny golden key scarcely larger than a sewing needle from inside her coat and handed it to Jessie before returning to the desk and opening the scheduling book. Jessie turned the key over in her fingers, a weary sigh on her lips. Impermanence. I should have known. Tricky bastard. When the contractor had mentioned the term, she hadn't anticipated her legs turning to metal from the knees down. Every night, an hour before midnight without fail, the numbness preceded her transmutation. Jessie inserted the key into the keyhole that had appeared on her knee. The nightly maintenance nearly drove her to quit, 50 turns to reset the gears in each ankle, each knee. I should be grateful the contract doesn't require toes. She didn't understand how the legs came back to life every morning an hour before dawn, but she dared not risk breaking the frustratingly vague conditions of the contract. It had made her return to dancing, and fulfilling the contract, unforeseeably difficult. With the support of Lord and Lady Tembury, they'd moved outside of Valerie City on the pretence of a need to recover, but lied about the severity of Jessie's injuries. Months were spent learning the enhanced strength and precision of her new legs, and a few more wasted performing in the background while lesser dancers had the spotlight. But her ability had garnered attention, and her appearances served to remind the nobility that she had returned to dancing with equal passion and grace. She teetered on the cusp of earning the notice of the theatre, but the wretched impermanence of her legs threatened to ruin those aspirations. "If I don't make it," she began, but Emmeline groaned. "We're not going over this again. Promise me you'll go on with your life." Emmeline's hands clenched into fists, her head turning slightly to the side as if she was steeling herself to shout. But Emmeline never shouted. The tension drained away as she exhaled and turned in her chair to fix Jessie with a look. "We're operating a bit oddly, but it'll be fine. Do you trust me?" Jessie sighed, but she gave a grim nod. If not for Emmeline's loyalty and her brilliance at manoeuvring through the social complexities of noble society, Jessie's return to performing would have gutted out like the promising stars who had flashed and died before her. Only Emmeline and her infectious good spirits could placate the bevy of displeased nobles Jessie left in her wake when she disappeared after any evening performance. Instead of socialising with her sponsors into the wee hours, Jessie fled to whatever private space they'd rented for the night to wind her legs. "I don't deserve you." Jessie no longer voiced the words. "So long as you have faith in me, I can't give up." "Good, because I've promised at least a year's worth of free dances with several houses once you've got your legs." "Whatever it takes." "I hear the Drayden Dragon is in town," Emmeline said. "Here to buy more appearances for her daughter, I presume." "Probably." Emmeline made a note in the book. "I've a luncheon with the ladies of House Graft tomorrow. They should be good for at least 2 performances, and there's talk of Lady Graft's niece holding an impromptu summer party. The dragon wouldn't deign to dine with such lowly nobles as we, so I should avoid competing with her completely." "Lucky." Jessie ran a finger along the firm line of her metal foot. Being honest, from the few times Jessie had performed with her, Alianne appeared to be developing into a capable dancer. The girl was timid, but having the Drayden Dragon for a mother probably had that effect. Jessie settled under the bed's thin covers, the windings complete. Sliding a pillow under her metal legs, Jessie tried to banish the nasal whine of Lady Drayden ringing in her head. Leaping through the air, Jessie landed with surety on one foot. She let her other leg unfurl in a steady line up and away from her body, the augmented joints of her contracted limbs more fluid than when she was mere flesh and bone. She completed a pirouette, letting her ribbon-like sleeves flutter and drape around her body until they reached the floor. Slow, deliberate applause sounded through the practice room, startling Jessie so that she dropped to her feet with a thud. "Court gossip is true for once," Lady Drayden said. She stood in the doorway, imperious in a burgundy velvet coat-dress, her grey-streaked brown curls perfectly arranged beneath a fitted hat that matched her outfit. She tapped the closed tip of an ivory cloth parasol against her palm. "I beg your pardon?" Jessie dipped in a curtsy, acutely aware of her shabby practice wrap and threadbare tights. "I've heard rumours of how wonderful your solos have been. Quite a surprise after such a horrible accident." Lady Drayden stepped into the room, dark eyes intent on Jassie's legs. "Truly, it wasn't so serious," Jassie said in a rush. "Inconvenient, but I've been blessed to have generous patrons." "And a marvellous doctor." Lady Drayden pointed at Jassie's legs with her parasol. "Why, it's like magic." Jassie froze. What could the Drayden dragon know? No one knows except Emmeline. Don't act flustered. "I'm grateful the Temburys know a lovely doctor in Outer Valerie. Would you like his name?" Jassie said, hoping her voice didn't quaver. "No," Lady Drayden sniffed. "Unfortunately, a doctor can't help my daughter. She isn't broken, but lacking in talent." "Miss Alianne appeared well at the spring festival." Lady Drayden made a disgruntled noise. "She could do better. That's why I've worked so hard to find you in this," she glanced around the drab practice room, "charming place." Unsure of how to respond, Jassie said nothing. "I have a proposal for you, and let us be frank. My daughter is no beauty, and she won't secure a favourable husband with her face. She needs dance, but her performances lack confidence. She's not receiving many invitations, and we can hold only so many balls before it appears desperate." "Alianne isn't ugly." "She's plain, which might as well be the same thing in our circles." Lady Drayden gave Jassie a challenging look. "Don't play coy with me." Jassie stared, unsure of the proper response. "House Drayden would like to sponsor you for a dance. My only request is that you allow my daughter to co-lead with you. Your performance of Ascension features 2 leads, does it not?" "Yes, my lady." "I've had Alianne practising the roles for a month." I must say," Jassie stammered. She felt heat flood her cheeks as Lady Drayden gave her an expectant stare. "This is unusual." "Nonsense. You are a rising star, and I won't deny that I want my daughter to benefit by association. Do you accept?" Jassie hesitated. Emmeline wouldn't approve, and the prospect of having the Drayden dragon watching over her every move left a sour taste in her mouth. "I plan on holding the dance in 5 days. The invitations have already been sent. Be a dear and don't cause me embarrassment," Lady Drayden said. Jassie perked up. Her contract would be complete. It was silent over the number of leads so long as she was one. "I would be honoured to accept." "Be at the manor tomorrow." Lady Drayden swept from the room. Peeking out the window of the steam coach, Jassie surveyed the Drayden estate. There was a cold aura to its elegance. Though her experience of major houses was limited, Jassie had been to several of the minor estates for her dances, and what they lacked in overt wealth they made up for in character. House Drayden stood 3 stories high, with a trio of towers spaced along the rooftop. The main building was larger than many of the minor houses Jassie had seen, and House Drayden had 2 wings flanking each side, connected by long passageways. "They do seem to like their 3s, Emmeline said. Rows of rose gardens spread out from the road leading up to the house, with a segment of manicured lawn separating each bed of flowers. The perfect symmetry struck Jassie as imposing rather than beautiful. Nothing appeared out of place. "I'm going to regret this," Jassie said, resting her head against the padded interior of their steam coach. She would never enjoy coach rides, but their practicality had won out over her fear. "Nonsense! 5 dances for 1 performance and paid for by the dragon. We'll make a businesswoman of you yet," Emmeline said with a roguish wink. "You probably shouldn't call her that while we're on her lands." Emmeline stuck out her tongue. The coach came to a halt a few feet away from the main building. The door opened from the outside, revealing the steward and Lady Drayden herself. "Miss Jassie, "Miss Emmeline," the steward intoned as he helped them from the coach, "did you have a pleasant journey?" "It's a lovely ride out here. Lady Drayden, your estate is stunning," Emmeline said. "Yes, stunning," Jessie echoed, nodding vigorously. "Indeed. How kind of you to say," Lady Drayden said. She wore a blue gown and tapped the same ivory parasol Jessie had seen earlier against her leg. "Come, I will show you to your rooms before we convene for dinner." "That's generous of you, my lady, but surely you have more important duties to attend to," Emmeline said, shooting Jessie a questioning look. "You are my honoured guests. My steward will see to your things." Lady Drayden strode off toward the house, leaving no doubt that she expected to be obeyed. Jessie shrugged at Emmeline, and the pair set off a few steps behind their hostess. They entered through the main building's wide doors, then followed Lady Drayden through a grand entrance hall. Servants hurried about the manor, cleaning artwork, polishing silverware, or carrying decorations of silk ribbons and vases of flowers. Whenever Lady Drayden approached, the serving people ceased in their tasks to bow or curtsy as she swept past. Jessie thought the staff looked weary. Apparently the sponsorship had been decided on more of a whim than Lady Drayden had let on. Jessie's eyes lingered on the row of geared magnesium lamps that lined the walls. No simple candle flames in House Drayden. She couldn't imagine the cost of such luxuries. The staff resumed their work, and given the sheer amount of decorations being toted past, it appeared like they were preparing for a larger gathering than Jessie had thought. Lady Drayden paused as the hall split into multiple directions. Using her parasol for emphasis, she pointed at each hallway in turn. "If you go left, you'll reach the dining hall. Forward, past the staircase to the guest towers, is the passageway that leads to the practice room into the performance hall. Your rooms will be this way." Lady Drayden motioned for them to follow her through the open doors of the right-hand passageway. "I've heard you appreciate your privacy, Jessie. This wing used to be our servants' quarters before we moved them to separate housing near the rose garden. I'm afraid it's a bit outdated, but you won't be disturbed." "It's very thoughtful of you, my lady," Jessie said. A set of wooden doors edged in tarnished silver barred their way. Lady Drayden withdrew a ring of keys from her pocket. "We lock the doors every evening. Here," she handed Jessie a single brass key. "This will enable you to reach the practice room at night if you wish." "Your estate is very secure," Emmeline said, raising her eyebrows at Jessie as they followed Lady Drayden into the former servants' wing. "Lord Drayden's passing last winter upset me greatly. I was advised to take greater control over my affairs if I wished to ensure their outcomes." Jessie and Emmeline exchanged bemused looks behind Lady Drayden's back. Fortunately, she didn't appear to expect a response. When Lady Drayden opened the door to the attached building, Jessie gasped in delight. A simple one-level cottage opened out before them, furnished in a manner over a decade behind in fashion and covered in a thick layer of dust. Jessie saw only delicious privacy and more comfort than several inns she'd frequented. "It's lovely, Lady Drayden. You are too kind." "Not at all, dear," Lady Drayden said. "Dinner is within the hour. I'll send a maid for you when it's time." She gave them a curt nod before walking back up the passageway. 3 days should have been an impossibly short amount of time to prepare Alianne for the dance. Lady Drayden had been true to her word. "You know Ascension well," Jessie commented after one morning practice session. They sat on a bench inside the large practice room, Jessie trying not to covet the space with its line of wall-sized mirrors and magnesium lamps. Alianne blushed, her fair skin going tomato red in a heartbeat. "Mother had my last teacher drill me on it." "How many teachers have you had?" "You're my 6th. Jessie rushed to fill the awkward silence left by Alianne's words. "Do you like this? I don't mean to sound rude. You're a good dancer. I understand people wonder, you know, because of Mother." Alianne shrugged, a dreamy look stealing across her face. "But I do love to dance. To be the star, To hear all those people clapping just for you. Jessie bit back a smile and nodded agreeably. Alianne grinned at her. It's the best feeling ever. I'm almost going to miss this place, Jessie mused as she prepared herself for the performance. Then she remembered Lady Drayden sitting in for most of the practice sessions, loudly tut-tutting at her daughter's every move. Almost. Maybe I should become a mentor, Jessie said as she adjusted a pin to secure the braid coiled around her head. I've had fun here. Alianne's shy, but she's willing to learn. Her mother, however, ugh. Hard to have much spirit with the dragon around, Emmeline said. I think Alianne's nerves may get the better of her tonight. Lady Drayden hinted at lunch that she'd be counting the errors. Dancing alongside you isn't going to do much for her nerves, my starlet. Emmeline shook her head. I'm off to work the nobles. Just think, after tonight we're free. Emmeline clasped Jessie's face and kissed her. Go on before you make me cry, Jessie said with a laugh. Emmeline sashayed to the door and blew another kiss before disappearing down the passageway. Jessie watched her go, a warm feeling glowing in her chest. The weight of it all, the contract, the legs, Emmeline's sacrifice, was lifting. Jessie finished applying her performance makeup, then went to the space she'd cleared at the front of the cottage. She could hear the random hiss and metallic clank of steam coaches, and the sounds of arriving nobility made her jittery with nerves and excitement. Breathing in a steady rhythm, she focused on her warm-up routine, banishing her anxiety. She tested the snap and flutter of her costume's emerald sleeves, rising up on silken shoes dyed to match her flowing dress. Absorbed in her moves, she didn't realise the lateness of the hour until the magnesium lamps outside the window flared to life. Frowning, Jessie lowered from her pose on one leg. Lady Drayden had said she'd send someone to usher her into the performance hall. It wasn't a standard practice, but nothing about the impromptu show had been ordinary. Jessie glanced out the window, then to the cracked long-case clock by the door. The performance was set to begin in a quarter hour. Apologies, Lady Dragon. Jessie tossed her coat over her shoulders. Rude didn't begin to cover arriving late to her own performance, and the contract was vague with regard to punctuality. She rushed down the passageway, thankful to see the connecting doors close to hide her flustered approach. Seizing one handle, Jessie was thrown off balance when she tried to yank it open and the door remained firmly shut. She pulled Lady Drayden's key from her coat pocket and jammed it into the keyhole. But the key would turn only a fraction, plaintive metal clicks sounding as its teeth slipped against the pins. No, Jessie moaned. Did she give me the wrong damned key? The doors had never been locked early before and shouldn't be now. Not on the performance night. Sweat broke out across Jessie's palms, and she dashed it away on the front of her coat. I will not be late. Throwing the useless key away, Jessie dashed back toward the servants' wing, intent on the path through the garden. The sight of the door ajar brought her to a halt. Her heart sank. The silvery scarf Emmeline had been wearing lay draped across the handle. Jessie peeked around the door. You certainly took your time, stupid girl. Lady Drayden stood in the centre of the warm-up area. Come in and close the door. Jessie complied. What is Lady Drayden stepped to the side. Slumped in one of the rickety wooden chairs from the small dining room sat Emmeline's motionless form, arms bound and a cloth stuffed in her mouth. A trickle of blood ran down the side of her face. Jessie leapt forward. You horrid bitch! You've killed her! Lady Drayden brayed a disdainful laugh. Don't be foolish. She's just unconscious. She lifted her parasol, withdrawing a thin duelling blade from the handle. Brandishing it with a flourish, she poked at Jessie, forcing her back. I'll wake her for you. Lady Drayden reached out and slapped Emmeline across the face with her parasol. Jessie screamed, fingernails biting into her palms as Lady Drayden's blade held her at bay. She breathed the slightest sigh of relief when she saw Emmeline twitch. Why? Why invite all those people only to hold us hostage? Contractual obligations, Lady Drayden said, a malicious gleam in her eyes. A contractor did advise me to take more control of the things that I wanted. I want my daughter to join the Royal Theatre and win herself a husband, but a commoner from a rural backwater has been stealing all the attention. My contractor whispered of the details for your bought legs. You'd sacrifice my legs for a supposed husband? Yes. I already sacrificed my husband and his financial security, Lady Drayden said, her lip curling with disgust. What was left of it? I want a son-in-law with the means to take care of the both of us, but wishing got me nowhere. A contract gave me control. Faint music drifted through the walls as the orchestra began to warm up in the performance hall. Without her. Jessie tensed, legs quivering at the sound. Lady Drayden made a tisk-tisk noise. If you try to leave, I'll skewer Miss Tembury. You wouldn't dare, would you? The major houses got away with much in Valerie, but surely not murder. Emmeline wriggled against the ropes, but another slap from Lady Drayden's parasol quieted her. They won't go on without me. Alianne won't. Hear the music? My steward has orders to direct them to perform without you, and my daughter will dance. She does love applause. Lady Drayden chuckled to herself. The dreamy look on Alianne's face burned in Jessie's memory. Ascension is a duet. I've hired a wonderfully deplorable understudy, Lady Drayden said. All those noble houses here to see you, but my daughter will steal the show and you'll have spited everyone. Not that it will matter after tonight. Jessie could feel the onset of the numbness that preceded her legs turning to metal. This time it bore a cold edge of finality. No, she thought with ferocity, picturing the contractor. I haven't failed yet. She took a step toward Lady Drayden, letting the blade's tip prick her chest. Why me? We both could have gotten into the theatre. You have the influence. What did I do that you'd get a contract against me? Lady Drayden smiled. You got in my way. The contract ensures my daughter's future if I remove her competition. That I get to remove a commoner from mingling with the nobility is a bonus. Go! Emmeline's muffled voice sounded around the gag. Lady Drayden scoffed. Run along, trade her life for a contract. My contract. Jessie froze, mind racing over her memory of the parchment signed long ago with a nib that glowed gold. The key to her legs, given with precise terms. The numbing sensation paused, and she could hear the contractor's slippery voice in her head making an inquiring noise. The tingling in her legs didn't retreat, but rather felt like it was waiting. She met Emmeline's eyes. Do you trust me? Lady Drayden waggled the duelling blade. What are you? Emmeline nodded. Winding a fistful of material from each sleeve in her hands, Jessie sprang at Lady Drayden, blocking the blade with her hands. The sharp metal tore at the fabric but couldn't prevent Jessie from grabbing onto the blade, and Lady Drayden was no fencer. With only her arms bound, Emmeline made an awkward lunge at Lady Drayden, sending them both and the chair tumbling to the ground with a crack as the wood splintered apart beneath them. Jessie loosened her grip as Lady Drayden went down, letting the sword slip free. She took a clumsy step forward, her partially numb legs jarring against the floor. She stamped on Lady Drayden's hand and kicked the blade away as Emmeline pulled free of the weakened remnants of the chair. Together they pounced on Lady Drayden, pinning the woman to the ground and trussed her. Have you any idea the trouble you'll be in for this? Lady Drayden snarled, a mess of once perfectly coiffed hair around her face. If you kill me, no one's dying today. We're not like you, Jassy said. And don't threaten us. You kidnapped a member of the nobility. A minor house, Lady Drayden spat at them. I'll have the constable after you. How far do you think you'll get dragging those metal legs? My contract was specific, Jassy said, clearing a space in front of Lady Drayden. And vague. 25 sponsored dances. You're my sponsor. The size of the audience is immaterial. Lady Drayden paled. No, that can't be. Jassy backed up and swept one leg out in front of her. Arching her feet, she rose onto her toes. Shrugging out of her coat and handing it to Emmeline, Jassy let her ribbon-like sleeves drape across her body. Springing lightly into the air, she began to dance for her legs.
Jamie told us a bit about how personal this story is for her. At the end of 2012, I was in a car accident that broke many bones in my lower half, starting at my ribs. This included my pelvis and both femurs. I was fortunate. I had great doctors, therapists, and a large margin for recovery. However, I went from being an able-bodied, active 25-year-old to non-weight-bearing for 3 months and had to relearn how to walk. I'm fortunate that my recovery saw a progression from wheelchair to crutches to cane, and now I can walk without an adaptive aid, but I'm not and will never be where I was pre-accident. This story was born somewhere in between the nightly shots of blood thinner to ward off clots from forming due to my forced inactivity, the seemingly endless days with my legs in a machine forcing my knees to bend, and the long months trapped in a bed, reliant on others for my every need. During my recovery and grieving process, a question formed. What would you do to get back your legs? Dancing is hard work. It requires countless hours of study, intense physical discipline, and is inseparable from daily pain. Steampunk's core trope of aesthetically beautiful mechanical perfection offers an interesting out to the dancer. I wonder if that's why steampunk dance stories often center around trade-offs or deals. Perfection achieved for sensation sacrificed, and overcoming biological limitation in exchange for maintenance requirements or debt. Another take on a question universal to the human experience. What do you want? And what are you willing to give to obtain it? Join us next week for...
Medea turned her face to the counselor, blank and polite. Her face was open, but betrayed nothing. It was a look we had practiced in the mirror and then on each other, thinking of ways that we could convey disgust without being too apparent. We did not give anything away that was not to each other.
Across the globe, the dreams of the artists are causing many a restless and feverish night. Someday soon, the call would come, where the stars were ready. The time would be easy to know, for then mankind would have become as the pseudopod flash fiction contest, free and wild and beyond good and evil, with laws and mortals thrown aside and all men shouting and killing and reveling in joy. Then the liberated pseudopod flash fiction contest would teach them new ways to shout and kill and revel and enjoy themselves, and all the earth would flame with a holocaust of ecstasy and freedom. Go to pseudopod.org or check the link in our show notes for all the details of this autumn's finest of contests. Cast of Wonders relies on your donations to pay our staff, authors, and narrators, and to bring you the best in young adult fiction week after week. If you've enjoyed this story, please consider making a donation to support us. There are lots of ways you can help. We have PayPal buttons on the site, we're on Patreon, and if something else would work better for you, just let us know. Every one-off, or even better, a reoccurring monthly subscription can make a huge difference, and you have, as always, our heartfelt thanks. You can share your appreciation for this story and us by leaving a review on iTunes, Google Play, or wherever you get your podcasts. Share the episode with your family and friends, or come discuss it on the EA forum, forum.escapeartists.net. We're at Cast of Wonders on Twitter. Come say hello. Cast of Wonders is a production of Escape Artists Incorporated and is brought to you by the creative team of assistant editors Danny Daly and Catherine Inskip, associate editors Amy Brennan, Alexis Goebel, Andrew Kim, Aiken Patel, Susie Rodriguez, Muddy Schleider, Chris Tang, and Xander Simon. Our audio producer is Jeremy Carter, and I remain as always your humble editor and host, Marguerite Kenner. Our episodes are released under the Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives 4.0 International License. That means you can share the episode, but you can't change it or sell it. Our theme, Appeal to Heavens, is by Alexei Nov. It's available at Promo DJ or his Facebook page, which you can find in our show notes. Thanks for listening.